Welcome. This is Ed Poswoli, president of TrippScott, and we're here for another installation of the TrippScott webcast series. Today we have James Toronto. James is an online editor for the Wall Street Journal and a columnist and editorial page editor for the online version. James, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Thank you for having the time to spend the time with us today.
Sure.
Let's talk a little about President Obama and Obamacare. Where do you see the prospects of this, and how does that impact business?
Well, it probably doesn't have that much of an impact on business right now because they delayed the employer mandate. The effects are somewhat marginal. Healthcare costs are going up. Some businesses are cutting back to part-time employees. What it really affects is individuals who are self-employed and who have been buying insurance on the individual marketplace. That's where the real disruption is taking place.
Right.
So huge numbers of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people have had their existing policies canceled and now have to buy new policies on the exchange. And of course, you remember the promise was if you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. Turned out not to be true, turned out to be a willful fraud, really. Now the claim is, well, if you have to buy the plan on the exchange, you may be paying more, but it'll be a better plan. That's sometimes true, sometimes not, but there's certainly many instances in which it's not true, or in which the plan is not sufficiently better to merit the extra cost, which runs into many thousands of dollars for some people. And in addition to that, you've got the problem that the technology isn't working, the exchanges aren't actually functional, so people can't buy insurance. So I think what you may see in January is more people without insurance on January 1st than on December 31st. That would be quite an achievement.
Well, because as in Florida, there was 300,000 people canceled from individual policy just last week.
Right.
And so the effect of the quote-unquote Affordable Care Act is now basically not having, well, people are losing insurance as opposed to gaining.
Right, and now, so the technical problems, the White House has promised us that the technical problems will be solved by November 30th. Wow. I think that not many people believe that that deadline will be met at this point.
Right.
However, what the White House did by putting that forward was it kind of bought itself some time. So now we just had, the day we're speaking, we just had these enrollment numbers published in the paper.
Right.
And of course they're very low, much lower than they anticipated.
So there's some 50,000?
50,000 out of, they were expecting 500,000 enrollees on the federal exchange in October. On the state exchanges, it's a different measure. They're saying about 3% of the total enrollment for 2014 has been realized. Apparently they're inflating these numbers by including people who have signed up for Medicaid,
right.
Some of whom were eligible for Medicaid before, and the states have just done some of the states have made an effort to increase their Medicaid rolls, and also by counting people who have quote unquote put a policy in their shopping cart but not actually purchase.
Not only press the button to buy.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Amazon reported its revenues that way.
There might be somebody looking at that pretty close.
So we have these enrollment numbers out, and now the Obamacare supporters are saying, oh, well, this doesn't really tell us anything except that the website isn't working. Well, oh, okay, so that's all, right. Except it's actually a problem because let's say the website, which is actually, I mean, Obama's right about this, it's more than a website, it's a massive technical undertaking that has all sorts of pieces that are invisible to the public, where databases have to interact in order to give the customer information, then in order to give the insurance company information. It's very complicated to fix. Let's say it's not working by November 30th. Well, then you're coming up on a very hard deadline of December 14th, which is the last day that people can sign up to get insurance effective January 1st. So that means if they miss their deadline by more than 2 weeks, people are going to be uninsured come January 1st simply because they can't get through to the exchange.
Well, that could present some harrowing disasters come early January, though. I mean, that's the issue. People who will have insurance now will get canceled, won't be able to get on the policy, or won't get on the exchange. And well, how long do you think that might last?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, the open enrollment period is supposed to go to March 31st. Originally, it was set up so that if you hadn't bought insurance by February 15th to start on March 1st, you would be subject to the mandate tax, to the fee for not having insurance.
Right.
The Obama administration extended that, effectively waived the mandate for another 6 weeks until March 31st. But the problem isn't really the mandate so much. The problem is people are going to be out of insurance. The other problem is, to the extent that they are getting signups, who's signing up? When you think about who has the patience to sit through, and finally get through to this creaky database, it's the old sick people who are highly motivated.
Right.
The young healthy people, they need to get insured to pay inflated rates in order to make this work economically, are the least likely to get online. Now that could go either way, because it could be that they make up for it in lack of volume, that so few people sign up that it's not an economic disaster. But we haven't yet seen the third phase of this disaster. The first phase is the technical disaster. The second phase is the consumer fraud, the false claim, if you like your plan, you can keep it. The third phase is the economic inviability of it all. The first one was kind of an unforced error. The other two were bound to come into play eventually. But then we come to the question of what happens politically. And I think politically there's a kind of holding pattern. There are a lot of uncomfortable Senate Democrats, especially those who are up for re-election in 2014. As it becomes clear, as I think it will in the next week or two, that they're not going to make the November 30th deadline, what happens then? There's going to be push for some kind of delay, some kind of repeal, some kind of major reform. And that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, but assume for a second Congress actually passes a delay of the penalty part of this. But that's not really the issue anymore. The issue becomes what happens to 300,000 Floridians, as an example, who received cancellation notices last week, and they've got to scramble to get insurance, and some of them may not. And so come January, they'll be without insurance. And if by chance something befalls one of those people, you're going to see those stories play out throughout the country.
Yeah, and by the way, even people who are able to get insurance, there was this promise you won't be able to, nobody will ever go bankrupt again because of health costs. Well, let's say you get a completely subsidized bronze plan on the exchange, so you're not paying anything in premiums. Great, you've got insurance.
Right.
But these bronze plans have out-of-pocket expenses of up to $12,700. These are not covered by the subsidies. So, there will be people at the margins who will not be able to afford even the free health care.
Now, James, before you go on to the next point, though, the bronze plan that you just described, then how is the Obama administration making the claim that the plans that are being canceled were substandard, and that's a good thing in a certain way? They're trying to spin that.
Oh, okay. The different tiers of plans, what they differ on is the out-of-pocket expenses,
right,
the deductibles and co-payments. What they don't differ on, where they're one-size-fits-all,
is the community rating
is, well, there's that, but there's also the benefits that they have to include. So my favorite example of this is almost every insurance policy sold in America beginning in 2014 has to include maternity care.
Right.
Okay, so that means if I buy insurance on the individual market, I have to purchase maternity care.
I'm relieved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm a single man. I am not going to get pregnant and have a baby. I can tell you that. It's not just men though. A postmenopausal woman, a woman of 55 or 60,
right,
also has to buy maternity care. Now, there is one category that's exempt from the maternity requirement, because there is a special category of what they call catastrophic policies. My colleague Joe Rago, who's the expert on this stuff, says they don't really deserve to be called catastrophic policies because they're still very loaded with mandates. But Secretary Sebelius said before Congress the other week that the group that can buy catastrophic policies, which are exempt from the maternity mandate, are people under 30. Okay, so who are they leaving out of the maternity mandate? The age cohort that includes women at peak fertility. I mean, this is just
that makes
insane.
no sense at all. That's the first I've ever heard of that. Why would they? Was there a rationale behind it?
I think there were two rationales behind it. They thought everyone needs maternity care; it's an essential benefit. You don't want a woman to, to find herself pregnant and have to have an abortion or whatever because she can't afford to have a baby. So they thought maternity. On the one hand, they thought maternity care is a vital benefit. On the other hand, they thought, well, people under 30 don't need all the coverage everyone else is getting, so we'll allow them to have this catastrophic policy. And they excluded certain things, and I don't think they quite added it up and figured out the crazy result they were
So the
getting.
one benefit that a woman under 30 might need is not there.
Is likelier to need than a woman
Some
over 30,
55,
much less
right,
a woman over
right.
40.
Right. So tell me, what are your thoughts? How does this, the rollout of both the website, the sign-up issue, and now ultimately the economics of Obamacare, they haven't really been able to draw, from what we can gather, younger people to these sites, mostly because they're down. But eventually they have to balance, in order to make this work, they've got to talk or have people sign up who are predominantly younger and healthier to make the economics of this all work.
Well, I'm starting to doubt whether they'll get to the point of even testing that, because, like I say, it seems to me we're coming up on a political crisis point on or somewhat before November 30th. Assuming that it becomes clear that they're not going to get the technical side of this working, kind of all bets are off for the longer term, medium term, really, economic inviability of the thing. So I think what you're going to see, politically this has to hurt the Democrats, but there will be an interesting dynamic at play in Congress to see just what they do. You've got the Senate controlled by Democrats, the House controlled by Republicans. A lot of Democratic senators are up this year. I suppose if I were running the House of Representatives, I would say, let the Senate go first. Let's see what they come up with, and then see what we come up with. But the one problem here is, you alluded to this before, delaying the mandate is not sufficient. In fact, delaying the mandate conceivably makes the economic problem worse, because it removes what incentive there is for the young healthy people to get insurance. So delaying the mandate isn't sufficient. They can't really order the insurance companies to reinstate the policies that have been canceled. There's no legal authority for that. The most that they can do under the existing law is relax the grandfathering laws to permit insurance companies to reissue those policies. But insurance companies are under no legal obligation to do so. If Congress were to pass a law saying insurance companies have to bring back the policies that they canceled under the Affordable Care Act, I think the insurance companies would have a very good legal case that this is a violation of due process.
Agreed.
The government comes along and says you have to cancel these policies and rewrite them, and then it comes along and
not that anybody paid attention to the constitutional ramifications anyway when they passed the bill, right? So,
well, right.
or when the president issued 1,600 waivers or so forth on the bill. So I don't know if anybody's all that concerned about the legal niceties around this.
Well, no, but in terms of a practical solution for this problem that's been created, it's not clear to me what that might be. We've had this disruption in the individual marketplace, and I think it's, you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube.
Right.
We're going to end up with people who are uninsured, and the fix is going to have to be a longer term fix.
But ultimately, what are the political impacts of the toothpaste coming out of the tube and not being able to get it back in?
Well, it seems to me that there are a few things to keep in mind here. First of all, the obvious question is who's helped and who's hurt by this law. And okay, who's helped, I guess, would be people who are newly on Medicaid, who are perhaps
the 50,000 people who've
policies.
signed up so far.
Well, not necessarily. Some of them are paying more for less good policies. So the people who are hurt most are people who had insurance,
right,
whose insurance has been canceled, who are now faced with either
gone.
not being able to get insurance or having to pay more for less.
Right.
And so these are people who wanted insurance or needed insurance badly enough to actually buy it on the individual marketplace before.
Right.
And I think that they're going to be more motivated in terms of voting and changing their votes than people who had to be rousted by the state to sign up for Medicaid. That probably tends to be a low turnout segment of the electorate. In addition to that, you just have this massive failure of President Obama's signature achievement, as they call it. And I don't see how that helps him.
Well, the question, like in Florida...
And in addition, let's just make this point. if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. He said that at least,
Yeah, that's just
think
the
the
outright
count
lie.
I've heard is 30,
Right.
34 times. That really goes right to his credibility.
Right.
And I mean, in a way, it's worse than other political lies because it is. I mean, you know, he said in his interview with Chuck Todd the other night, this only affects 5% of Americans. Well, that's about
not
16
true.
million people. You're right, that's not true. There are people with employer-covered plans who are going to lose parts of their, who are going to, you know, whose plans are going to be diminished. There are people on Medicare who will be affected by the cuts. But let's even accept his number, 5% of the population in the individual marketplace, most affected by this dislocation. 5% of the American people is 16 million people. Imagine if Bernie Madoff had swindled 16 million people.
That'd be outrage.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's an understatement.
I look at it differently. I look at the 300,000 people that were canceled in Florida, and considering how close the elections are in Florida historically, that could throw in balance 2014 and potential 2016.
Yeah, and the election was very close in Florida in 2012. Obama
Right.
Pulled it out, but we had to wait a few days to get the results. Fortunately, I guess the election was already decided by the other 49 states.
Right. We didn't have another 2000 election.
Right.
Well, James, I appreciate the time. Thank you
Thanks.
for sharing your insight on Obamacare and pressing issues. Again, thank you very much for joining us.